Shane Hewitt and the Night Shift podcast.
When we kick into a new year, I always say this whole new year, new you. Like every moment is a good chance to start the new version of you. You don't need to wait for the new year. Turns out every moment is a good moment to start a divorce. You don't need to wait for the new year. I'm joking, of course. I am divorced, for clarity in this conversation. I don't recommend it for anybody. What I recommend you do is I recommend that before you get married, you get some counsel from loved ones and faith people and close people and mindful people, and make sure you're marrying the right person. And then once you have committed to that person, you seek out every little bit of help and direction that you can possibly get to learn about yourself so you can navigate what your marriage looks like. Now, if you're in a situation where something is criminal or aggressive or violent or inappropriate, well, then, of course, you go make those decisions. I'm not going to say you just ride it out for that. But when it comes to partnership matters, and we're going to have a conversation because January is often referred to as divorce month. We would like to leave that behind because I would like to think that less people get divorced. Julia Fogarty is here, and Julia's going to help us understand what's going on. First of all, divorce month. I'm assuming that just means more people are filing?
Yeah. So oftentimes when you're coming off the heels of big events like Christmas time, people try to avoid separation, especially where there's children. So you see a lot of potential separations deferred that were or would have taken place in December happening in January. Mm-hmm. And if I could just interject one little thing there. So you were telling me about your experience and about what you think would be necessary steps in approaching a marriage. And I'd just like to insert one more step.
Please.
A prenuptial agreement.
Well,
50% of marriages, unfortunately, those are the statistics, end in divorce. What could make this a far less painful process is a domestic contract, a prenup. The prenup sets out what your financial assets are coming into it, what you'd like to do with those assets if the relationship doesn't work. And having this contractual document saves people thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people.
So what about the people that don't have anything? They're just like, Julia, you're my penguin. We're meant to be together, and so we're broke, but we're in love. Prenups for those folks. How do you get that? Because I mean, it's easy if I have a house and you don't, or you have a fancy car and I ride a bike. Like, it's easy to sort that stuff out, but it's not always easy when everybody's is not bringing a lot to it.
So one thing that is good about it is it provides a clear method of transparently seeing what each person has in terms of assets. Part of putting together a domestic contract is disclosure. So you'll know what position each of you are in, and that's a necessary conversation, I think, for any marriage.
More realistically, debt, right? I mean, because sometimes we get married. Hey, we're married. By the way, here's my $75,000 credit card bill.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes the reality is you have one partner who's very financially responsible and one who may not be. And, I mean, we love them anyway.
Yeah.
But it's good to know exactly what you're getting into. And a lot of times people don't. You get into a marriage and then you go to purchase a home and you find out your partner has no credit.
Is the difference in the cost, because you said it can save tons of money?
Yeah.
I was lucky because we did navigate it with a mediator, so our time was spent with a mediator, not in front of the lawyers. Mm-hmm. So that was, I mean, that's also a good way to go too, but use the prenup to get organized in advance. Is that what it is? Is because when you talk about money when you're not hurt, it's a lot more clear as opposed to after the fact, because usually, most cases in divorce, not everybody's on board. Yeah. So, does that mean it just gets tangled up in the human part and just gets dragged out? Is that why it's cheaper? Yeah.
A lot of times it does. Yeah. One person really wants the relationship to end. One wants to keep working on it. And sometimes it becomes very petty. That's just the reality of it. And, you know, you do your best to counsel your clients to behave rationally and reasonably, but this is an emotionally heavy subject.
Yeah.
So something that may not have a lot of value or a lot of worth. For example, I had a client once who had a collection of coats, and there was a monetary value associated with these coats. Mm-hmm. But fighting over coats that may be worth $5,000 and spending $30,000 in legal fees for something that's only worth a fraction of that
Yeah.
isn't really very economical.
No.
But it's
And
the emotional.
you can hear the principal part, right? Like, if I can't have this, you can't have that. You can almost hear it going from there. See, if this is why I'm not a lawyer like you are, because I would be like, you need a whiskey. Here's a whiskey. And I don't think you're allowed to do that. I think that's against ethics. Senior associate lawyer at Shulman and Partners LLP, by the way. So what about things that change in this? Julia, because, I mean, sometimes you go in and one person has a house, the other person doesn't. Well, 10 or 15 years later, you might have two houses. And you also might have now incorporated and integrated a more blended family. The kids are, proper step kids now, and you have your relationship with them. And so caring for everybody forward might be a little bit more of we just now need to take care of everybody. We're okay with blending this stuff. Can you redo a prenup over time?
Absolutely. So a prenup can actually have a couple different names. Technically, at its core, it's called a domestic contract, and the naming of the document changes based on when you sign. So a prenup is a document in advance of a marriage. A postnup is one after. So what you're talking about is effectively either an amendment to a prenup, which is fairly common, or a postnuptial agreement that replaces a prenup. And sometimes where you have major purchases or major life events, we do recommend revisiting the document to make sure, one, it's still fully accurate, two, it still covers everything that you need it to, and three, if there are any changes to any of the terms. Because sometimes over the course of a relationship, maybe when you went into it, you weren't agreeable to spousal support, for example. So a stipend payment or a monthly payment or some kind of payment to your spouse if the relationship dissolves. And maybe 10 years into the relationship, that position has changed. Maybe you think, you know what, if we separated, I should be providing some kind of support to this person, and this is what I'm willing to give.
Yeah, I have a friend named Sean who he and his wife had zero desire to have kids. Zero desire, so you could see how they would not go into. They both had careers. They would have had no reason to say spousal support, basically. But then through the course of time, they had an accident. And they had their first kid. Turns out, great parents and loved it, had a bunch more kids because it was great. So you can see how things where one parent starts giving up their career and things start to change over time. Yeah. That's got to be hard, though, after you've been together for a while to say, maybe we're not on the same page. We should write this down.
Well, that's what the whole conversation is about, right? It's never a pleasant conversation to say, hey, we need to sit down with a lawyer and we need to talk about a prenup, postnup, a domestic contract, a separation agreement, what have you. But having these conversations is actually really good for the long-term health of a relationship because it defines what the relationship is, what happens if the relationship doesn't work, and it takes a lot of pressure off because you know that if something does happen, you have this legal document as a safety net.
It's amazing. Let me ask you about this. We often hear about wills, and I know y'all do wills and stuff too. So, but if your prenup has an offset value, like one house, no house, kind of before you got married, does that help in the will scenario, or does the will just trump all things?
I know the answer you're not looking for is it depends.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
But it really does depend because the will is the document that's going to take effect after you've passed away. Usually you try to make sure that the terms align, and then there's specific clauses under the legislation if you're a spouse and you're still married, whether or not you're going to take under the will or if you're going to take under the statutes, and you can elect to do one or the other. But that is a much longer discussion. So the prenup and the postnup are usually things that come into play if you separate, not if you pass away.
Well, I just mean it from the perspective that, typically with a divorce, somebody's making a decision. Sometimes with dying, you don't have a choice. A little bit different scenarios. Senior Associate Lawyer, Shulman Partners, LLP, Julia Fogarty, with a resounding it depends, and a lot of clarity, too. I really appreciate the help. Thank you.
It was really nice meeting with you. Thank you for having me today.
Shane Hewitt
and the Night Shift on the iHeart Radio Talk Network.